Virtual town hall. My name is Aaron. I'll be moderating tonight's discussion. I'll turn things over to Senator Conway here in just a second, but first I wanted to let you know how you can participate tonight. So the questions we're asking come from emails and a survey you sent to Senator Conway's office. If you're watching from home, you can also ask a question via YouTube or Facebook. If Senator Conway doesn't get to your question tonight, please feel free to email his office. At the end of this show, we'll have his email displayed so you can contact him and he'll get back to you then. So now I'll turn things over to Senator Conway for some opening remarks, and then we'll get to your questions. Senator Conway.
Good evening. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you for attending this town meeting. I am State Senator Steve Conway, representing South Tacoma, part of South Tacoma anyway, Parkland, Spanaway, Frederickson, and some of Lakewood. And it's great to be here tonight. You know, I've been thinking about town meetings and the number I have had in my career in the 29th Legislative District. And I think this is somewhere around my 25th town meeting that I've had. And it's the very first virtual town meeting. So I feel a little bit out of sorts tonight, but I think this virtual reality that we have really empowers you because it doesn't make it so difficult to get to a meeting and get to meet with me. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight and look forward to your questions that some of you have already put in, and I know some of you may have questions tonight. And I'm very excited about, meeting with you because to me, this is what legislators must do, is have dialogue with their constituents. I represent you in Olympia, and I want to hear from you. And so that's why we have this town meeting. You know, we're really kind of at the halfway point in the legislative session. We have a 105-day session this year, and we basically have done the Senate bills. We've introduced bills. I've introduced several bills. If some of you are interested in those, I can tell you about them. But we have had those bills in the Senate chamber, and they have been voted on. And now they've moved over to the House, where these bills are being heard by House committees. At the same time, we're getting ready, perhaps most meaningful part of our legislative session, and that's the introduction of our budgets, our Ways and Means budget, our appropriations budget for the state of Washington, over $54 billion budget. And the House Senate budget will be introduced this week. And I'll be very interested in hearing from you about that budget. So please be prepared for that budget. It comes out I believe, on Thursday or Wednesday. We also will have a capital budget. We've had many capital projects in the 29th district, and I know some of you have benefited from those capital budget projects. So I'm interested in hearing your comments on that as well. And the transportation budget, a very lean transportation budget this year because of the fall in revenue, mostly gas revenue, because most of us are at home and aren't traveling in our cars like we used to. I can say to you in the first half of this session, the Senate has done some major work, and I want to speak to that work. I think when we all went into this session, we all recognized that the legislature had not been in session since the COVID hit our state. So the legislative session has spent a good time of trying to address those COVID-related issues that are so important to you. And in fact, we managed to put out nearly $2 billion budget just recently with assistance for our people, whether it be with rent or whether it be with school money for our schools so that we can reopen our schools, dollars so that we can address all the many COVID-related healthcare issues that we've had, from nursing homes to hospitals, etc. So the COVID issue has really been the major issue in the legislature. And fortunately, we recently got another boost from the federal government to help us solve that problem. But that's not the only issue. We've been working on the police accountability issue. And I know that the police accountability issue is important to all of us. I think we've all recognized that there has been issues there, and we need to address these issues that are very important to us. One of the major bills I think that we passed in the Senate was a child care bill, especially helpful to low and lower income people. This is a critical issue in this COVID related problem we're having, is to ensure that people have access to child care. I can talk also about labor bills that we've passed. We've passed several COVID related labor bills designed to address the issue to ensure that workers who are forced to be at home because of COVID are ensured that they will be able to access worker comp for that reason. So that's a critical issue, I think, that's important to all of you. And I want to say there have also been a lot of bills dealing with the issue. Of course, there's been a mandated. The governor has said we should not evict people during this time. There's a major bill being making its way through the legislature, addressing the evictions and rent and how to get us back to ground zero on that issue. So I think that there are major bills that are making themselves through the legislature at this point. And so with that, I just want to say this. I recognize that many of you have been adversely impacted by this COVID. And I want to assure you that this office, the legislative office, my legislative office, and my aides are there to help you with these problems. For some of you, it might be rent. For others, it might be unemployment insurance. For others, it might just be a complaint about employers and how you're being treated inside this COVID situation. So I am here to work with you, and I'm also here to help you get the vaccine that is so important for all of us. So if some of you are still having problems getting access to vaccine, please call me and we'll use our resources to try and help you with that. That's a demanding issue because so many of us are seeking vaccines or not. But I want to hear from you if you're at that point where you're about ready to give up, because getting vaccine now is so important. And so with that, I want to turn to the questions that you've brought to me tonight. And again, I thank you for coming here. You know, I can't tell you how important it is for us to have this dialogue.
Great. All right. And we will jump right into the first question here. Susan from Spanaway asks if you could please work to pass the Working Families Tax Credit. Senator Conway, could you tell us a little bit about that policy and efforts this year to address Washington's broken tax structure?
Yes, the Working Family Tax Credit has been on the books for many years here, and it actually allows for a state grant to people who are on the lower income in our district. And in fact, the problem has been that it hasn't been funded. And yet, in this time and age, there's been a new debate in Olympia about our tax structure. Our tax structure is imbalanced. As you know, the poor and the middle class people pay far more in taxes than the wealthy in our state. That's a known fact, and that's why we call our tax structure regressive. And what we're trying to do is to figure out a way to rebalance that tax structure so that the middle class and poor people in our district and in our state, mind you, don't pay a higher share of the taxes. The Working Family Tax Credit bill there's a bill that's in our committees right now. It seems like the legislature is poised to bring some dollars to that credit. And it'll be, frankly, the first time since we actually passed the bill. But again, this is all part of this effort to rebalance the tax structure in our state so that the poor and the middle class people aren't paying such a high percentage of the taxes to the state and the wealthy pay more. And I wanted to point out the capital gains tax, which passed the Senate, mind you, is also an effort to do this. Some of you might not know what a capital gains tax is, but it is a tool through which people gain wealth. And in fact, the tax that we passed in Olympia to tax those people on their capital gains only impacts about 45 people in Pierce County. So it's another method by which we're trying to rebalance this tax structure. The capital gains tax will be used to support childcare. I know that we have so many families where the expense of childcare is a major block to their lives, and so we are trying to figure out a solution to that problem. These bills that we have probably don't solve the problem completely, but we're on the right path. Thank you.
Great. All right. And our second question comes from Marcia from Tacoma, and she has a question about voting rights. She'd like to know what the legislature is doing to protect voting rights in Washington, in our state.
Yes, I think we're all kind of in a daze after what happened in Washington, D.C., and about the continual complaint from some about the voting issues in our country. I was amazed. I saw an article just recently in the News Tribune about how Pierce County had one of the highest percentage of votes in the last election. And that is a statement to the value of the voting system we have in our state. That means that a higher percentage of registered voters or people who are able to vote actually voted. And so we need to protect that system. I think there's a lot of criticism right now of the mail-in ballot, but the mail-in ballot has actually helped military families and helped many, many others vote on election day. And so we need to protect that right to vote and the right to have an absentee ballot to vote. And it's interesting to me that a Republican Secretary of State in our state has endorsed this voting process. So we will protect this because that's what makes democracy work. Thank you.
Right, and great. And Senator Conway, our third question comes, let me get to it real quick here, from Melissa in Tacoma, and she has a question about puppy mills. She would like for you to vote in favor of House Bill 1424, which would block the expansion of the retail sales of dogs and ban the retail sale of cats. And just for the viewers' information, that bill is getting a public hearing tomorrow.
Yeah. I would support that. I think there's been we've had several bills dealing with this in the past as well. We do have a problem that some raisers of dogs and cats, some people out there are only interested in making money off of them and not protecting them. And so, this is why we do have some breeders in our state that are doing the right thing and taking care of these animals. But we also have these puppy mills, and I know that bill actually prohibits the sale of cats. And I think that it's important for us to protect these animals, and so I'll be a yes on that bill. Thank you.
Great. Next, we have a comment that came in to us from Facebook from Carrie or Kari. Sorry, Carrie or Kari, I might be messing up your name, but she would like to know about property taxes in Spanaway, Frederickson, Puyallup, Parkland areas. She thinks that they're overcharging middle-class housing, and she's noticed a huge increased percentage from public school costs. So could you talk about that a little bit, Senator Conway?
Well, I actually think all of us are seeing a hike in our property taxes. I'll be honest, because the value of our property is going up. I've noticed my own home that I own here in Tacoma, actually, and near Fern Hill. It's gone up in value, and when it goes up in value, my property taxes go up in value. I do believe that some of it may be due to our school levies, and I don't deny that. But many of us do vote for those levies, and so we have to be concerned that if we see the levy raising our cost of our property taxes, well, that's one reason why we have school boards that we meet with. I will say also, though, that we have probably, we are going, the property tax level is a major issue, especially for those people on fixed incomes, seniors, some disabled folks who have fixed incomes, and people who have very low wages, in fact. And so we are introducing a property tax bill this session that will allow more seniors to qualify for the senior deduction. And what it does, it allows them to use their medical costs to lower their income so that they qualify for that senior property tax exemption. But it is a problem with property taxes with the raising value of the property. I know that many of us like to look and see that our property is worth more, but when it's worth more, it costs more money. And of course, a lot of the property values are being driven up by the speculation on property in the Puget Sound right now, and it is a problem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your question, Kari. Next, we will go to Ray, who has a question about the Employment Security Department. And Ray would like to know what is being done to help make sure people receive their benefits and that instances of fraud are addressed and stopped.
The fraud issue is being addressed. I know it was a major fraud issue, and the Employment Security Department has actually responded very, very strongly on that issue. I will say that's been an extreme disappointment to me, the troubles that Employment Security has had in delivering unemployment benefits to some of you. It is to me, and during the last recession we had here in 2010, 9, and 10, there were no problems. But suddenly we all had problems with this, and many of you did have problems. We have actually spent many hours visiting with Employment Security about improving that process. And in fact, I introduced a bill. It's a Senate bill. I'm sorry here, I forgot the number. Maybe my staff will help me here, but the Senate bill, it addresses many of the problems that the Employment Security Department has had, and ensuring that we have more adjudicators inside the Employment Security Department to resolve the problems that often arise out of these claims. And many of these claims the problems are arising out of the poor communication vehicles that the Employment Security Department has used in reaching out to claimants. And that bill addresses that issue. And the bill, we do have a standing committee set up we have a standing committee set up that basically will be meeting this whole full year after we get done in the legislature to work with Employment Security, improving the process by which claims are delivered. There were nearly 55,000 people who recently received a notice from Employment Security Department about the fact that their wages were going to be leaned upon, that their house would be leaned upon, and that they would have to repay hundreds of dollars. That's the kind of communication that the Employment Security Department needs to look at carefully, because it wasn't the case that they would do that. Again, it's a failure of some claimants to provide all the information that led to those letters, and their fear that there was not another problem with fraud. So we need to work with the Employment Security Department to ensure that everyone who qualify for insurance get their insurance. And it's crazy that we have this backlog. And I'm very disappointed, and I'm hoping that this bill that I put together will help strengthen that department and get us back to where we were only 5 years ago, when we had a deep recession and no problems at that department. Thank you.
Senator Conway, that bill is Senate Bill 5193, and it's currently in Senate rules, or House rules, excuse me. And so it's just awaiting a vote on the House floor. So that's great news.
That is great news. Thank you. I'll let you know I've been only in virtual meetings since 9 o'clock this morning.
We can't remember we can't remember every one of them. So next we'll go to Carol from Tacoma, and Carol has a question about police accountability, specifically one of your bills, Senate Bill 5353, the community policing bill. But could you talk a little bit about that bill and also some of the other police accountability efforts that are making their way through the legislature this year?
Yes, and I'm happy that we have something positive to talk about here. I think we were all very alarmed by what we saw during the summer months and some reaction to people. And and the demonstrations that occurred. And I just believe fundamentally that we needed to address this issue. I think that the bill that most of us probably would support and do support is some kind of independent review of these circumstances that occur. Uh, I think that we have seen examples right here in our district where we've had overreaction on situations that have led not only to injury but to death. And so I am very committed to get this issue resolved and resolved in a way that really protects individuals from overreaction here. I want to say, though, that the one bill that is coming over to us is a bill that I think is House Bill 1267, which does set up a Department of Independent Review. And when this issue first arose, I think that both many people in my district said, Steve, we need to have independent review. So I'm very happy to see that. And, there are other bills out there, the SB 5051, a bill that kind of had some that I actually voted for on the floor, which deals with the state license for police officers. And it does grant some authority to our Community Justice Training Commission to have some control over the issuance of those licenses so that we can address the problems. There's another bill, the duty to intervene, Senate Bill 5066, which I voted for, which is asking police officers when they see a colleague of theirs overreacting, that they have some obligations to intervene in those situations themselves. There's an important data collection bill that's out there so that we collect the data, and many others. Police tactics bill has come over from the House as well, which would restrict certain kinds of tactics that we saw in these many incidents last year. But one bill that I did introduce that I want to talk a little bit with you, because I know that I have some good friends who are very interested in this bill, and that's 5353, which is a bill addressing community policing. Some of you tonight probably are very active in safe streets in my district, in this district. I'd say my district, but this district, and have been very active for 2 decades in working with the police department, Tacoma Police Department. I understand now we're working with Pierce County Sheriff's Office. I understand that we're working with the Lakewood Police through Safe Streets as well now. And it set up a beautiful dialogue, or not beautiful, create a good dialogue, I should say, between police departments and the neighborhoods and the people that they police. And I think it has created a far different environment in our county regarding our police department. It's not to say our police and sheriff they do not make mistakes. They do, and they should be corrected. But we have a far more positive attitude through Safe Streets about our ability to affect change, working in partnership with our police departments. And so the bill 5353 was introduced just simply to use this moment in time for us to use community policing as one of our tools in improving the relationships between the police departments and the neighborhoods which they serve. So I know I have some Safe Streets people because they've been actually publicizing this town meeting, and I want to say thank you for your work, because you are the true heroes of that, because many of you have taken your private time to make this community policing work in Pierce County. And so I'm excited to try and get this bill passed. It's now in the House. It passed the Senate unanimously, I might say, and is now in the House. I think it's going to be moving out of committee tomorrow to the Appropriations Committee. So I encourage you all to make sure that you lend your voice to the support of that bill. But I'm very pleased that we've been able to get this community policing on its way to being a statewide movement. And I think it will help change the dialogue from us versus them to we. And I really mean that from my heart. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And next we have we've had a couple of questions about nursing. So one that you received in your from one of your constituents from an email was Jackie from Spanaway, who has a question about skilled nursing funding. She'd like to see an annual Medicaid shortfall of $117 million addressed, which would create better outcomes for nurses and their patients. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our Medicaid, we have low Medicaid rates in our state. And it's a major problem, not only for nurses, but for our hospitals and for many others in terms of reimbursement. Our nursing homes have been really underfunded as well. So we are improving our Medicaid rates. I want to actually begin, I should have said this initially, and thank the nurses for all what they have given us during this crisis with the COVID. You know, they went to work when most of us were at home, and they put their families and themselves in jeopardy. And they are truly the heroes. And I do believe that we will see some improvement in the Medicaid rates. It's hard to know the budget. I've not seen the budget, so I can't speak positively on that. But I really ask our nurses to communicate with me about that budget. And if they see a need for it, let's do it. All right, let's get those Medicaid rates up. But I want to point out that one thing we have been doing is to ensure that our nurses have what we call in the worker comp law, that they have the right to worker comp when they are relieved of their work because of the COVID exposure. This should be a simple issue for them, that when they get exposed to COVID and have to go home and quarantine themselves, that they should be allowed to receive worker comp. And we've been passing several bills on that, what we call this COVID presumption, to ensure they get the reimbursement that they need. And having said that, I want to, as long as we're on this issue of the COVID and essential workers, you know, we have a lot of people who have been working through this virus. I mentioned the grocery workers because I once worked for them, but they're really good friends of mine. And you think about their exposure in those grocery stores and what they've been faced with. And so it's important that we protect essential workers in this COVID, and we've had several bills in the Labor Committee to do that. So I thank you for the question. I really thank you for your service.
Great, thank you. The next question we had come in on Facebook is from Julian. And Julian asks about Senate Bill 5148, which is the harassment of election workers. Julian would like to know how it's doing, and was it amended to include protections for presidential electors? The bill, I can tell you, Julian, is over in the House right now, and it's scheduled to get out of committee on Friday. Senator Conway, could you tell us a little bit more about that bill?
Well, I know Julian very well. So Julian's a good friend of mine. He's been involved in veterans and disability issues in our district for many years. And Julian, I did take your issue. You were a presidential elector and you did get harassed. And we did share that with the State Patrol. And that's the kind of election harassment that should not be happening. And that's why we did have a bill that we passed. And yes, it should include presidential electors. I'll look into that with staff and see if they've included you in that response on that bill. But, you know, you and I have visited about what happened to you as a presidential elector, and it was wrong. It was wrong that you received a death threat at the point after you've been elected by your party, mind you, to serve as a Democratic presidential elector. And that was wrong and it needs to be corrected. So thank you, Julian, for your comments.
And next, we have a question from Alexandria from Tacoma. And Alexandria would like to know about for-profit prisons. She's in favor of House Bill 1090, which would effectively prohibit the operations of for-profit prisons in our state. She's asking you also to support the bill and for an update on it.
Well, I supported the bill because, we've really had problems in Tacoma with the prison, the federal prison that's being used for purposes of immigration violations on the tide flats. And that prison, of course, has been the object of a lot of conversation and a lot of problems. And it is the problem with private ownership of prisons. And we need to maintain public control over our prison system and not privatize it. So I'm fundamentally in favor of that and have voted for the bills that have actually the problem with the prison down on the tide flats is a federal issue. And we need to get that under control as well. So, but the privatization of prisons is not right. That's not the way we should be going. So thank you and I do support the bill.
Great. And just so the audience knows, that bill is in the Rules Committee. So it's actually was passed out of the Rules Committee. So that could be coming to the floor soon. Next, we have a question from Joe, and Joe comes to us via YouTube. Joe would like to know if you're working on any bills or know of any bills that help address getting resources to people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. And Joe says that sometimes police are not always the best people that should respond in those situations. So Senator Conway, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that this issue is what we call in Olympia behavioral health. And we have been trying to integrate behavioral health with physical health for at least the last 8 years. Because we're beginning to recognize that, behavioral health is as important, if not more important in some cases than well, I'm not saying physical health is unimportant, but behavioral health needs to be integrated with physical health. And yes, there are bills that are making their way through the Senate or have been before the Senate that is increasing our funding for behavioral health counselors, school counselors in our schools. And yes, we need to be sending the right kind of people to the streets when mental health people are having their problems. And I think that's part of police reform as well, and we do have bills. I'm sorry, I don't know all the numbers on these bills, but we do have bills that are addressing the issue of trying to send mental health people to people who are in crisis on our streets. And I don't need to mention the situation that occurred right here in our district. That was a mental health crisis, and of course led to what we know a death of an individual. And so, I believe that mental health is at the root of a lot of our issues. We're trying to increase school counselors. We have bills to increase school counselors. So it is a major concern, and a major part of our thinking in Olympia is how to improve our behavioral health services for people. This has been a challenge. I had the behavioral health people come to me and bring to me an issue that was kind of odd, that when they've gone virtual themselves, a lot of mental health counselors are meeting with patients virtually. But what I found out is that they don't always get reimbursed by the insurance companies for their virtual work with their clients. And that's an issue that needs to be addressed and corrected. But behavioral health is a major problem, and we've not done well in this state. We rank very low in behavioral health funding, and we are trying to get more balance than that. So thank you for your question.
Okay. And up next, Senator Conway, we have a question about broadband. Your office received quite a few questions about broadband and the need for more broadband in the state. So could you talk a little bit about the state's efforts to expand broadband and the importance of that service for all of Washington's communities?
Yeah, I think it didn't take many of us to realize that we all don't have great access to the internet. I mean, every one of us are in certain places in our community where we can't get good broadband access. And when we're sending kids home for their schooling, and the only way they can get schooled is by broadband, we need to do something about that. And we need to improve our broadband services. And I'll let you know there are both bills in the capital budget to improve broadband services, and we passed bills to improve the broadband service. It seems to me that broadband is the communication technique of the future. It's honest. We are living in a virtual world, and it's good in many ways. And like tonight, being able to meet and talk with all of you. Thank you, broadband. But is the service right in all parts of our city, even? Or let's not even mention rural areas? Absolutely not. Part of our problem is that we allow private companies to develop broadband access. And it may be that we need to expand the ability of our public utilities to provide that benefit. And I don't mean cable TV here. I'm not talking about Click for those of you from Tacoma. I'm really talking about broadband access. It seems like broadband access has become as important a need as electricity and water were in the past. So we need to figure out a way to ensure universal broadband access. And we are getting some federal dollars to help with that in the federal COVID bills that have been passed. But it is critical that we have universal broadband access. And if you want to know the bill numbers, certainly call my office. I think that I have those numbers somewhere, but talking with you tonight, it's hard for me to remember all the numbers. But I will definitely say the legislature is working. But we do probably need to change our thinking around broadband and start asking our public utilities to provide universal access to us. Thank you.
Great. Up next, we have a question from Ronald about landlords and tenants. And Ronald would like to know more about what's being done to support both landlords and tenants during the pandemic.
Yeah, I have some notes on this, and I want to get to it. You know, the freezing of evictions by the governor in face of the COVID reality has created a major problem for us because a lot of people were out of work because of COVID and were unable to pay their rents, and so they were protected from eviction during this critical time we're in. So this issue has been a major focus of the legislative committees dealing with housing in the Senate. And there has been an effort both to provide support for tenants in terms of rent and landlords in terms of mitigation, because they are not getting the revenues that they would normally get. And so there has been an effort to help landlords as well. This is a joint problem that needs to be addressed. And as we move out of COVID, it's going to be a major problem that landlords and tenants have got to come together and work out their differences. And of course, the legislature is providing mediation services to help with that, because this is a major problem and needs to be addressed. And I often feel sorry for the landlords because the banks have not stopped asking for them to pay their loans. It's surprising to me that we don't ask the banks to do that, because the loans can't be repaid unless there's revenue. And so I am often wondering why the banks haven't been brought more directly into solving this problem. But we are working on several bills that are in the Senate and in the House, trying to develop kind of mitigation for landlords and mediation between tenants and landlords as we get out of this COVID situation. Thank you.
Okay, and next up, Senator Conway, we have a question right in your wheelhouse. We got a question about pensions for you. So your office received several emails opposed to the merger of Left One and TERS One retirement systems. Could you talk a little bit about your position on that issue?
Yeah, well, I'm not in favor of that, mind you. I will say that, I'm on the Select Committee on Pension Policy, and I've been on that committee now for 24 years. And so when you talk about being in the wheelhouse, I am in the wheelhouse. There is some interest in some legislators at trying to merge the Left One system, which is overfunded some, with one of the systems that's underfunded. And frankly, that will not work. In fact, it all it does, if you think about it, be like saying to people, we're going to merge Social Security with the military budget. I mean, and the Social Security people would be very unhappy about that. And the Left One members are extremely unhappy about any talk of merger. This was done in the Republican budget, not in the Democratic budget. And this was done in their proposal to merge these systems. And it really has not had a hearing in the Senate. It won't be heard in the House. I have many really good friends in the Left One system that I've reassured that there will be no touching of their pension system unless they're involved in it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next up, Senator Conway, we have a question from Ron on Facebook, and he would like to know what's being done about homelessness and people experiencing homelessness in Pierce County.
Well, we have, again, we have had several bills the one big bill, I think, will be in the capital budget because, the loan program that the state offers for low-income loans to build housing for them is critically important for the building of more homes for low-income people. And to me, much of the homelessness problem, aside from its ties with, drug abuse, which we know is a problem as well, is caused because of being unable to pay rent and have your own home. So we are doing what we can through the state system of increasing the supply of low-income housing. There are bills out there designed to increase middle-class housing as well, which offer individuals or individual developers property tax exemptions for 10, often 20 years if they'll build units in our communities. And certainly, as you see that in the city of Tacoma. So we're increasing the supply of that housing as well. But frankly, that housing's not affordable. We must focus on low-income, on affordable low-income housing. And our state housing trust fund is how we do that. And I can only say to you that we are working on that. The fact remains that we do not have adequate housing supply, and so we need to increase that supply. And so we are working on that through several bills in the Senate and House.
Okay, up next, Senator Conway, your office also received several questions about Washington adopting a low carbon fuel standard. So could you tell us a little bit about the low carbon fuel standard and what your opinion is on our state switching to a clean fuel program?
Well, I support the clean fuel program. I think the fact that California, Oregon, British Columbia all have it and we don't is a problem, and we should have it. I do believe that, the bill passed the House and now is in a Senate committee, in the Transportation Committee. And I don't know what's going to happen on the status of that bill, whether it'll be voted out of the Transportation Committee, because they are more interested in a cap and trade policy to address the carbon emissions in our state. And so cap and trade, I just came from a meeting 40 minutes ago where we voted a cap and trade bill out of the Ways and Means Committee, which in the long run will reduce carbon emissions in our state. But the low fuel standard bill is another tool of that. And it's a question in my mind as to whether the committee's response, the Transportation Committee will be moving that bill out. I know it passed the House handily, but they did not pass cap and trade either. So we're kind of at a loggerheads around this because the House wants the carbon fuel bill, and the Senate is tied in with a cap and trade bill. So I just will say that let's watch and see. There's a lot of time left. We still have another month to move in terms of, or a little over a month of work in the legislature to go. So let's see what happens. But I'd be wrong to say I don't agree with that bill. How can California, Oregon, British Columbia do this and we not do it? Doesn't make sense to me. And it will make the air in our communities healthier.
Great. Thank you. Senator Conway, next we have a question from Diana, and Diana would like to know why is the state spending 120 million on a nursing facility for about 100 people, but no funding for the tens of thousands in the Housing Trust Fund with developmental disabilities? Why is there no money set aside for them?
Diane Stodden, hello. And I got your email, Diane, and thank you for it. All right. And I say that directly because I know Diane Stodden. She's a good friend of mine, and this is her concern. Her concern is that we're putting capital dollars into what are basically long-term care facilities for disabled people, and they would rather have that money invested into community settings and low-income housing. And I understand the concern there. I understand that this is a very difficult issue. Many in our disability community would rather have us investing in community housing for our disability or our mental health folks, and not putting dollars once again into another state facility like we have it in Lakewood, our state hospital. Uh, I I will say that in answer to it, Diane, you know this is a very complicated issue. You've been involved in various committees trying to figure out how we can move this state away from its own strategy of using the long-term care facilities as a way of managing mental health in our state, and to opening and putting more dollars into community settings as well. I will say that we are moving in that direction, but we still have the problem with the mentally health people, those who are we are unable to put into prison, but who have been violent. So a lot of the investment is going into that type of facility so that we can ensure that those people are inside a secure facility. That's what we call secure facilities because they're 24-hour care facilities, and whether or not we can do this on a local basis runs right into a lot of resistance from neighborhoods to having those kinds of people living in their neighborhoods. So I know this is a challenging issue, and I will say that you have asked for the low income or the Housing Trust Fund to target disability uh, housing and for people who are mentally ill and are disabled who need that housing. And I'm very willing to work with you on that. But let's see what happens in the capital budget. The capital budget's coming out again on Wednesday, I believe. And so you'll be able to connect with me, and we'll ensure that we have that funding in the low income housing programs for the mentally ill and for those people who are have disabilities.
Senator Conway, we have your office has received several questions about just about getting kids back into schools. So could you talk just maybe a little bit about kind of your opinion on that? What's being done to transition back from remote learning into in-person learning?
Yes, I think that what I'm aware of is that my school districts are moving that way. They're moving with the lower grades, the kindergarten people and the first graders usually, and then they increase the elementary kids, and then they bring the middle school kids into it, and eventually the high school kids. So that I know that this is occurring already in Bethel School District, and the Franklin Pierce School District, and in the Tacoma School District. I'm not aware much. I don't have much information on Lakewood, which is also part of our district. But my grandkids are now going back to school, so I'm aware of it because they're telling me all about it. And so I think this is a challenging issue, and I think we've got to recognize that that we are making progress in that area. I think recently over the weekend we saw that they've reduced the distance between allowable distance in the schoolrooms from 6 feet to 3 feet, which is going to help many school districts move their lower grade kids back to school. But we also have some resistance to that from teachers, and they have concerns about it, and we have to. They're the ones that do the teaching, and they're the ones who feel the risk, I believe. so that they have asked us for vaccination as well. And in fact, the governor finally put them on a priority list so they can be vaccinated as well, which should hopefully improve their willingness to reopen these schools and get these kids back to school. And so I believe that ideally this will have to be gradual. I know that many kids probably have once again the gut fear of going back to school. I know my grandkid children did. So the gradual way in which some of the districts are moving, I agree with. In other words, we can't just immediately reopen all our schools. There needs to be a gradual process here. And I think the school districts are looking at it very carefully. The school boards, of course, have the control on this. They and the public health, the local public health people, because they are all looking at more gradual integration of kids back into the schoolroom. And I think that's probably the right policy. I believe that there's some thought that we could have kids back in school by the end of the school year and all kids, but I think it has to be gradual. I understand that one of the biggest problems for many families is just childcare. So many of our families in our district are two-income families, and they've been forced not to have that because of the fact that someone has to care for the children at home and ensure that they can access their virtual education. Virtual education has not been right for all kids. We know that. So let's just work together gradually to get these kids back to school, and let's all get ourselves vaccinated. Because the more people who are vaccinated, I go back to that, the more we vaccinate ourselves, the sooner we're going to get away from COVID. Let's not go the way Europe is going right now. Let's go the way that we have been moving in this state. Our state has done a great job. We have one of the lowest death rates from COVID in the nation here in Washington State. So we have been doing it right. Thank you.
Great. And Senator Conway, this is our last question. It's about transportation. Virginia asked if there's a way to provide noise reduction along I-5 near the Bridgeport Way exit.
Well, I thought about that question. I saw that question last night, and I thank you, Virginia, for the question. And yes, we can look at that. That's one of those questions that I wish I'd had at the beginning of the session rather than now, before the transportation budgets had been developed, because we have been putting up, those sound walls to help protect people from the sound of lots of traffic, and I'm sure that exit there is, of course, a major military exit as well, and probably there's a lot of noise there, and we can address that issue. So let's work on that. I might take this opportunity, though, in talking with transportation, to say that we are trying to figure out a way to get a new transportation budget out. We have a lot of major problems in South County with our transportation needs. Anyone who commutes into Tacoma along Pacific Avenue at the rush hour time knows that. Even C Street is becoming a problem, and so we need to improve the transportation access in South Dakota and South Pierce County in the Spanaway area, and certainly we're using buses, but not all of us can want to use a bus, but some do, and so we are getting rapid buses. But I think that our transportation budget, as I said earlier, has been dramatically impacted by people who are staying home and not driving their cars. I know that I'm not driving my car as much, and I'm sure many of you are in the same way. In fact, I even saw an interesting story last night about how whether or not there is going to be a major change as we move more people to working from home. Are we going to have the same type of congestion on our roads? So, we will have a transportation budget. We're hoping to have a major project budget out. That's part of the reason for the cap and trade policy that the Senate is promoting, is to use some of those dollars to help fund transportation projects in the state. And so we will be looking at transportation projects. And if that project bill comes forward, I want to make sure it includes something to address the problems in our community as well. But if you'll let my staff know about the issues out there at that intersection, please, at Bridgeport Way, let me know about it, and we'll see what we can do. It's never too late in Olympia to try and correct these problems. I've learned that from many, many years of engagement down there. Thank you.
So, Senator Conway, that's the end of our questions. Do you have any parting words you'd like to leave the?
Well, I'm not sure. I want to make sure that everyone is familiar with my staff. Kimberly Lally, who's in my office. Many of you, when you call my office, get Kimberly. Or during the session, we have a session aide. Darcy Settle is there. Darcy and Kimberly, I wanted to put their faces up here, but I don't think I can. But Darcy and Kimberly are there to answer any questions that we didn't get answered tonight, or to figure out a way for you to connect with me. You know, I think the one great beauty of this world we're in, this virtual world we're in, is that it has allowed me to have conversations with you directly, as long as you have access to the internet. And I am willing to do that with groups, and I've been doing this. I just had a group this weekend that I talked about the low fuel standard issue with. A large group, many who are constituents from the 29th district. And I'm very willing to do that with other groups if other people want that. I believe that representing you is my job, and a way we maximize my ability to represent you is we maximize our ability for me to communicate with you directly. And so we can do that virtually, we can do that by phone. So please know that our office is prepared to work with you on these issues. And I want to once again reinforce something I said earlier, that right now we are at the key point of the legislative session. The budgets are being produced, and the budgets fund the bills that we've been talking about as well. So the budget documents are truly the key document for a session, and they will be coming out this week. And so this is a time for you to pay attention. I know you can access these budgets online. Some of you will be accessing the budget through friends, because they're the ones who are reading the budgets and letting you know what's happened. And please stay in touch with me, because this is what I do, is represent you during this critical process. So I want to thank you again tonight for this first virtual town meeting that Senator Steve Conway has participated in, and say I kind of miss the old way, because the old way we could have a little coffee, we could also talk with each other before and after the meeting, and have that ability to make this more personal. And to me, that's the beauty of democracy, is our ability to work together as a group to move policy in the state. And so I truly miss that, but I look forward to hearing from you, and also waiting for the day when we get back to the old town meetings where we can really break bread together and have coffee and really talk through these issues. So tonight, I want to thank you for taking your time to participate. You know, democracy only works through participation. And that's why I believe in town meetings, because it is really the only way which we can really build a participatory democracy and make our democracy stronger. So thank you. I want to thank the staff who has helped us here tonight. They have been, will you introduce yourselves, staff, the behind the scenes here who have made this possible? Can you come on?
Tribe, Aaron, thank you. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Aaron is invaluable, folks. If you ever want to find a person who has a real ability to, he's our communications director for this Washington State Senate. And Aaron, thank you for tonight for putting this together. Thank you, Kimberly, again, for what you've done as well. And again, we'll close this out. And thanks, Aaron.